And that's one of the questions that needs to be looked at, is what leads to the persistence of belief. And I think we already have some ideas. I think religious belief probably utilizes or hijacks more of these adaptive mechanisms than, say, Father Christmas.
Can I throw in a couple of things into the equation? I think that the social reinforcement appears to me to be obviously very strong. This goes back to one of the rituals that you were referring to, the meeting on a Sunday, or perhaps even more than just a Sunday, at the congregation, being part of that group. That's part of it. But is there not also a strong argument to suggest that a lack of belief in Santa Claus is not going to condemn you to an eternity of hellfire? The fear factor of not believing, to what extent do you think that might play a part?
No, that's excellent. Because one of the other, I think, adaptations that religions pull into is the moralizing one. And yes, there is some with Santa Claus. Santa Claus is, Santa Claus knows if you've been naughty or nice, and not going to give you presents if you've been naughty. So you get a little bit of that. But religions are obviously much more powerful moralizing agents. And so that would be a reason. Though, let me add one thing that you alluded to earlier that I forgot, which was Jesse Baring's experiments with the alligator and the mouse. Because what he showed is that and I highly recommend to anybody the work of Jesse Baring, his book. I think in the UK it's called The God Instinct, and in this country I think it's called The Belief Instinct. But he also has this in separate papers, and I think they're available online. I'm not sure, but the one I'm referring to now is an experiment which is described in his book, and it's also in the journal American Scientist. And it's, again, I just love it because it's brilliant, and Baring also writes very well. But he takes children, and he says, this is just a puppet show. It's make believe. And he has a crocodile eat a mouse. And then he asks the children questions. And does the mouse still eat grass? No. Does the mouse, is the mouse still thirsty? Does the mouse miss its mother? And what you see in the children is that, particularly young children, they have the continuation of mental life in the mouse. The child knows the mouse is dead and says, no, the mouse doesn't eat grass. Does the mouse miss its mother? Oh, yeah. And is the mouse still angry at its brother? Oh, yeah. And so you see in children the ability to imagine life after death in an animal, and it's right there. And they then did some research on these children and followed them, and the children that were in just ordinary schools, what in this country would be called public schools, the state-run schools, the local schools, those children, when tested later with the mouse and the alligator, they knew that the mouse was dead and didn't miss its mother. The children that went to religious schools, and I think they were particularly Catholic schools, those children were, some of them much older, and they still had the idea that the mouse missed its mother. And so you can see right there religious indoctrination skewing the child's ability to know an animal was truly dead, and I just thought it was brilliant.
I apologize if it appeared that I wasn't paying attention. I was actually looking in your book for the reference that you referred to. This is Jesse Baring's work?
Yes, it's
The Cognitive Psychology of Belief in the Supernatural, American Scientist, 1992-2006, pages 142 to 149, and there are other links that I will include when the videos are posted.
I think it's. I'm pretty sure it's in his book too, which is absolutely worth reading. Lovely book.
There was also, I know, Andy, that another matter that you wanted to raise, because this is something that you became aware of after you'd actually written the book, and it's a paper that you kindly referred me to, and I have printed it off. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to read it, but it is in relation to believers' estimates of God's beliefs and how they are more egocentric than perhaps we first thought. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Certainly. And again, this paper is available on the web, and you can, as you did, you can print it out, and I encourage people to read it. A fellow named Nicholas Epley and some co-authors, mostly at University of Chicago, and I think also at Monash University in Australia, did some research, and they did 7 different studies, and the 7th study was done with neuroimaging. And the essence of it is this, that when we think about our own beliefs, say our belief about homosexual marriage, or our beliefs about the death penalty or abortion, when we think about those beliefs, that's in a particular part of our brain, medial, again, the medial midline frontal cortex, a particular area. When I think about what Richard's ideas are on those issues, there's another part of my brain that lights up. Now, when I think about what God's belief is about those issues, I would think, and I think most people would think, the area of the brain that would light up has to do with what another person, another individual believes. That's not what they found. What they found was that when we think about God's belief, the same area of our brain lights up that lights up when we think about our belief. That what we think God believes almost directly reflects what we believe. And they did experiments where they talked about found out what your belief was, what God's belief was on an issue, what you thought Bill Gates would think about it, what you thought an average American would think about it. And, that's how they map these things out. And it's a dense paper, but it's well worth reading, and certainly reading the introduction and the conclusions. Because what they then did, which is just lovely, is they manipulated your beliefs. So they had you read papers advocating a particular position, or they had you give a speech. You had to give your own speech on a particular issue, advocating a position. So they changed your beliefs, temporarily at least, but they shifted your beliefs. And lo and behold, your belief about what God thought of the issue changed in accord with it, whereas Bill Gates' view didn't change. And they, as I said, they did 7 different studies, and the 7th one was with neuroimaging. And again, I think it's a fascinating paper. It shows a number of things. Above all else, how science is mapping this stuff out. But again, I think the most interesting part was that how you imagine God believes in something is just what you think God's attitudes are towards something is just your own attitude.
As someone posted on my most recent video, one could almost say that God is intelligently designed.
Yeah. By ourselves.
Exactly. By ourselves.
And the idea and the implications of Epley's work is interesting. So people may not be so much influenced by their religion. So, the Baptist beliefs in anti-abortion they may not be so much influenced by that, but they may join the Baptist church because it reflects their own beliefs.
Well, I've come across that on a few occasions, and I find it quite surprising. The number of people who have said to me, well, these are those that have come to religion late. Well, you know, I thought about becoming a Muslim, and I thought about becoming a Jehovah's Witness, and I thought about it, but I ended up going for this. And to me, that is like, that's window shopping. You're going looking for what suits you, not what the truth is.
Right, and that's what Epley's work would support, is that you choose a religion that reflects your own beliefs at some level, and you may not be conscious of it.
I don't think you are. I suspect the argument that the hardline theists will come back on is that something along the lines of God made us that way, or they'll rely on a passage from 2 Romans, I think, which runs along the lines of God wrote morality into all of our individual hearts, or something equally unconvincing. Andy Thompson, can I thank you very much indeed for your time? It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I know that we could carry on talking for hours and hours.
Absolutely, I could talk for hours and hours on this, and again, you know,
well,
I just really appreciate the opportunity.